This is the testimony that will be submitted to the Guam legislature regarding an oversight hearing on June 29th on the Guam Board of Medical Examiners and the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners. It also covers the legislative meeting online also covers the reappointment of Dr. Nathaniel Berg to the Medical Examiners Board. The oversight hearing is long overdue. I've been asking for a long time that the senators have an oversight hearing. I just wish we could all be at the legislature to face the board members and to face Dr. Berg and to face the others when they give testimony, so they can see that consumers have a real face and what has happened with consumers. Let me be blunt to start off with and say that both the Guam Board of Medical Examiners and the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners have serious problems. The Guam Board of Medical Examiners, currently under the so-called leadership of Nathaniel Berg, has been in violation of a public law for at least 8 years. They have not implemented the Patient Protection Through Information Act. It's been on the books for 8 years. The purpose of the law is to protect us, the consumers, and let us know about doctors and information regarding them. And there's also another law that they haven't implemented, which they were mandated to do. They have recently started to make some futile attempts after their lack of compliance was brought out at the arbitration information hearings recently conducted. The law is a consumer law that protects patients on Guam against negligent doctors. But it's my opinion, and that of others, that Nathaniel Berg and the board did not want to protect us through an existing law, so they just ignored it with excuses. They want to protect, in my opinion, and that of others, and by their actions, they want to protect negligent doctors the same way as they came out against the Arbitration Act, which would make doctors who injure or kill us accountable. The Guam Board of Medical Examiners, in a meeting that I attended last year, stated they will license anyone that meets only minimal qualifications. I almost went through the roof when I heard them say that. My son Asher had just recently passed away due to alleged medical incompetence by someone they licensed. Minimum qualifications. The board has knowingly licensed people with past histories of malpractice. They've known it. When they licensed me, they've seen it in their histories, they've seen they've been accused of malpractice, or allegedly had malpractice, or whatever. But they license these people with these negative histories, and then these doctors come to Guam. And these doctors have histories of injuring people, or even sexually abusing patients, and they come to Guam and they do the exact same thing. We all must be familiar with the recent case where a doctor sexually abused patients. The board knows of these histories, but they choose to ignore them. Again, compromising safety of the people of Guam and us, the patients and the consumers. Imagine this. There were 6 complaints of sexual improprieties against the doctor that the board knew about. Did they wait for all 6 to get in front of them rather than doing something after they received the first? Dr. Gill, a board member, spoke years ago about peer reviews. The board is supposed to have peer reviews when they receive complaints about doctors. A peer review is when it's a self-regulation where qualified members of a profession within the relevant field will look at what the complaint and what's happening and help them give input. It's not a radiologist reviewing a pediatrician's work, even though our licensing board seems to think that way in the way they're functioning. Peer reviews, which is part of the impartial review process, really, I don't know of any, really have ever happened at the Guam Board of Medical Examiners. But my Asher Dean, was never afforded what Dr. Gill said should happen, a peer review. Again, this board under the leadership of Nathaniel Berg is about protection of doctors and the apathy that goes along with it. It's obvious to us, not only as parents, but the community, that the Guam Licensing Board doesn't provide us the impartiality and the services, and they don't protect us the way they should be doing. You would think that with the Arbitration Act, which protects doctors more than any other law in the whole country, that the Guam Board of Medical Examiners would be more objective in their job to protect us. They've got the Arbitration Act, so why doesn't the Guam Board of Medical Examiners, which is part of their job, step up and say, hey, you know what, we need to look at this closer and see what happens? Why do they do investigations of complaints against doctors, by our experience, and refuse to meet with the victims' families or the victim? Imagine the death of a 5-year-old, my son. They refused to meet with me. I'm the father. I was there. I witnessed what happened. I watched my son dying at the clinic. I'm the one who had to argue with the doctor to examine him, who didn't want to and was dismissing us. I went to a medical examiner's board. I went to a medical examiner's board meeting, and I emailed them several times. And I said, "What's the current status of this case? What's going on?" "Oh, we'll let you know. We don't have a quorum with this, that, and the other thing." Always some excuse. Went on for at least 5 months. Didn't hear anything. Then, no response from them until the very day that the Pacific Daily News released the story of our lawsuit against the Seventh-day Adventist Clinic. Coincidentally, they might want us to believe, that date, with no notice to us, Nathaniel Berg released the results of his investigation to the Pacific Daily News without informing us, without telling us about the results. The PDN knew the content of a letter that was eventually sent to us when they published the story. We had to read about Asher and their investigation in the newspaper. They never approached us, never came to us. They didn't interview us when they were doing the investigation. When they came up with the results, they didn't call us, they didn't notify, they didn't give us advance notice, discuss it, come in, do you want to discuss it? Nothing. Oh, PDN, same day the lawsuit was announced against the Seventh-day Adventist Clinic. You want to call it a coincidence? It's not. It's unethical. It made our nightmare worse. It's my opinion that Nathaniel Berg and the board released a letter to protect the doctor and SDA the same day, showing that his biased, in our opinion, corrupt investigation found no problems. Super unprofessional and negligent. And again, it's all about protecting the doctors that heard Asher without the parents' input. That's the arrogance. The current Guam Board of Medical Examiners has serious conflicts of interest. Do you think Asher got a fair investigation of what happened to him at Seventh-day Adventist Clinic by Nathaniel Berg and the board? Nathaniel Berg makes large sums of money from the clinic. Do you think Berg wants to find fault and lose that income? Even if it's not true, the appearance of conflict of interest is just as serious and strong as a real conflict of interest. And there's definitely real conflict as well as an appearance. Why wouldn't he recuse himself from such an investigation? Instead, he went to the clinic, or they went to the clinic, and they said, "Oh, Doc, no, is everything okay when you saw Asher? Oh yeah, we did this, everything is okay." They left with that information, came back and said, "Oh, every doctor says everything's okay." Hello. The investigation is with the doctor. They can say whatever they want and you believe it. I already told Nathaniel Berg that the records were wrong. They didn't do the things stated in the records. Didn't matter. They don't care. And he never met with me to clarify or anything. They didn't meet with us. That's unethical, to say the least. The Guam Board of Medical Examiners needs to be replaced. the law that started that board and the current board members with the conflicts of interest, they need to be replaced, and, and they also need to develop an impartial grievance process. The board of doctors should not be allowed to bring people to Guam who have histories of injuring people and sexually abusing people and bring them to Guam to do the exact same thing to us here. As long as Nathaniel Berg is on the board, and I'm totally against him being reappointed, totally against it, and he shouldn't be reappointed. It's actually unethical. As long as he's on the board, especially as the chair, and this board functions to protect all doctors only, as it does now, definitely as it appears to be doing now, at the expense of consumers, it's my opinion that lives will be lost on Guam by injuries or sexual abuse by doctors will continue to happen with no accountability. And hiring anyone from the states that only meets minimal requirements should not be the benchmark for bringing doctors to Guam with histories of negligence. Regarding the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners, some of the same situations as the Guam Board of Medical Examiners. Accountability has been a common theme lately on Guam. In the news with discussions about the Medical Malpractice Forced Arbitration Act. This is particularly concerning with some of the questionable practices of the Guam Board of Medical Examiners and the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners. In the last public hearing we had on November 17th, 2019 regarding Forced Arbitration Act, Senator Talahi told Dr. Yasuhiro that his testimony was a breath of fresh air. I have to agree. Rather than focusing on the Arbitration Act, pros and cons, he discussed the governing boards, Guam Board of Medical Examiners, Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners, Dental Board, etc. He discussed these. He discussed how they handle complaints by consumers, or maybe how they don't handle complaints by consumers. And he talked about how strong boards can take care or mitigate some of these problems and take care of these people if they become malpractice issues and work to alleviate things, which is not happening now. The need for impartial reviews of complaints was stressed by Dr. Yasuhiro and Senator Talai, would offset many of the problems that we see with arbitration-related medical negligence. Consumers have a right to have their complaints heard by the Allied Board or the Guam Board of Medical Examiners, as an example, without the current bias or prejudice. Sadly, I guess the Guam Board of Medical Examiners also did not get the impartiality message following the status quo. It's hard to believe that the Guam Board of Health Examiners chair, Ms. Mamie Balahaja, has been on the Allied Board for only 20 years, for over 20 years, as has possibly maybe 4 or 5 other people on the board. 20 years on a board? This is possibly the longest chair of board members of any board on Guam, or maybe anywhere in the country, outside of an autocratic country. 20 years on a board? They are supposed to be reappointed as mandated by law every 3 years, but this hasn't happened. No Guam board should have the same members that long. It negates new ideas, new members, motivation, etc. It destines the board to the humdrum, apathetic, inherently biases to maintain the status quo and their fiefdom. Not to mention, easily leads to corruption. What also worries me is that just recently, the Board of Allied Health Examiners went to the legislature to establish ethic guidelines for the Guam Board's licensed professionals to get them approved in law. Recently, ethics for professionals who are already practicing is better late than never. But this should have happened years ago. This should have been a top priority for the board, not to mention the board members who have been there for 20 plus years. What have they been doing? Ethical standards are the top priority for any governing licensing board. I know this because I was also licensed by that board, and we have national standards. How can you protect the community and hold people to professional standards in ethics when you never established such standards for 20 years until recently? Who is holding the Guam Board of Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners and Medical Examiners accountable? I am sure that if you contact similar boards across the country, all will tell you that they have had established ethical standards in place for years. That's for sure. Not the Guam board. They've got 20 years. They got status quo. They think they can do whatever they want to do. They become complacent. This is one reason that board members need to be reappointed every 3 years. To keep people motivated and current in law and actions which aim to protect the community and to hold members accountable. New members, new blood, new ideas, new graduates, fresh energy, honesty, etc., all are needed on any board. With this is the need to establish a real impartial review system for complaints of professionals that the board license it. Yet still, as everything else at the Allied board, the impartial review system has not been set up. It's at the same place as it was 20 years ago when these board members joined the Allied board. Reviews of citizens' complaints with the Allied board, if they ever get to do them, and there are many that are just sitting there for years, are not impartial, quite the opposite. They are biased from our experience. Many complaints have been sitting there, but that's expected, as members of these boards must see themselves as protected and can do what they want, and they've had 20 years, and they have 20 years, in that 20 years, maybe to figure it out. This is exactly what Dr. Yusuf emphasized in his testimony, and Senator Lahi to discuss. The need for fair, impartial boards that we do not have now. Hey, Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners members, this isn't 20 years ago and how things were done back then. It's time for you to move on or act to protect the community, not your personal interests or friends. It's time for the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners to be under that same law as other boards and members having to be reappointed every 3 years. It's time for Mamie and the others who have been on that board for 20 years to leave. Let's get some new blood. Let's get some new people, some new college graduates, some people that are excited about the job and not just sitting around looking for shortcuts. I know you're also doing a hearing regarding reappointing Dr. Nathaniel Berg, and I already mentioned a lot of things. But let me just say, I am against him being reappointed to the Guam Medical Board for the reasons that I had outlined above when discussing the Guam Board of Medical Examiners. He has shown incompetence, in my opinion, bias, and has not followed the laws on Guam, and seemingly put his income before a proper investigation to complaints against doctors. He has seemingly put his own interests first over that of the consumers, and has severe conflicts of interest and an inability to recuse himself when faced with such conflicts, making him not appropriate for the board and not able to protect consumers on Guam. He is responsible as chair for bringing doctors here who have injured or sexually abused us. That's him. Him and the board. That's him. He's the chair. He's responsible. He signed off on it. He knew of the problems and did nothing when they ignored complaints when they came in. He has not in any way addressed how to mitigate consumer concerns or provide for an impartial board and peer reviews. It doesn't seem important. Both are called for. He refused to recognize that people die of medical negligence in Guam and will not set up a system to offset it or mitigate it. Or even follow through it. And if you really question what I'm saying, there's one other thing to keep in mind. When the consumers spoke in front of the legislature and gave information about medical negligence, Dr. Berg didn't sit and listen to them. The head of the Guam Board of Medical Examiners, Dr. Berg got up and walked out the door. I guess what we have to say as consumers and parents of people with children that have died are not important for him. He just walked out the door. Didn't care. And this is the person that should not be on the board. It should be somebody who will listen to us, talk to us, and find out what he can do to mitigate the situation and work for impartiality. Thank you very much.